We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry
Everybody!
We wish you a Merry Christmas
and a Happy New Year. Welcome back. It's the WILK Friday BeerBuzz Holiday Pageant of the Airwaves, Part 2, special hour-long broadcast as we do every holiday season. And this is Part 2. And our guests here in the studio with us, we have Ben Schoenfeld from Benny Brewing Company. We have,
How's it going, guys?
Friday BeerBuzz special alumni guest, D. Joe Thomas.
Thank you.
Of course, Lindo Sabatini, and we're enjoying some of his pizza here this morning. And Bill from mybeerbuzz.com.
Yay!
We have the Pickwick players here too.
Yeah.
do we introduce our Pickwick players?
We should do that. You mean the studio, our studio audience?
Our studio audience.
Is anybody
Beer
on
lovers.
the lam or doesn't want their name on the radio?
These are beer connoisseurs.
Amanda Sheptak is our electrical engineer here this morning. Becky Kosadar-Krantz is the most highly decorated female brewer in all of Mayfield, ladies and gentlemen. My lovely wife Karen is with us this morning. Carol Zubers, our director of special operations, is here as well. And me and Nancy, but we're here all the time. So there we got that going.
We got
for
the
us.
Yule logs going too.
Yeah, we do. You definitely want to check out the videos. It'll be posted in 4 different segments on WILKnewsradio.com and on mybeerbuzz.com. Speaking of which, here's Bill.
Hey,
Hi, Bill.
segment 2.
We're doing pretty good so far, guys.
Segment 2. We started sort of a theme here.
We should do German beer. Oh, now segment 2.
Yeah, you will pay attention. We want to pump up Belgian beers. We really like them. We think they're really unique and interesting. We think they're a step above a lot of beers that you can get, locally. And you can get all these at Sabs. So we're going to feature a second Belgian beer. But the question I get asked a lot is, what makes a beer a Belgian beer other than it's brewed in the country? And it's all about yeast. And yeast is something that we've learned about beer and the importance of yeast in beer. And Belgian beers use unique yeast. And that's actually plural. They use unique yeasts. So many times they do.
So we're pretty close to a tongue twister here. Is that?
They are.
Yeast.
Many times they do a primary fermentation with one type of yeast. They do a secondary fermentation with a second type of yeast, and then they bottle condition them, which means they're fermenting in the bottle with a third type of yeast. And many will tell you that these traditions go back into the 1600s and 1700s, and that's why their beers are so hard to make in the States, because they've cultured these yeasts for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they don't just use one. So you have to get it right 3 different times to reproduce their beer. But yeasts are a big topic and really important in beers. And we got Benny here, and I know Benny knows a lot more about yeast than I do. I know in general there are lager and ale yeast, but how important is the selection of yeast in your beer?
Well, the yeast is probably 75% of the flavor a lot of times, especially in a beer that's yeast forward like this kind of style, where there's no hops really to hide any yeast profile. So, I mean, in the Belgian strain especially, you're getting phenolics, which gives you that kind of spicy kind of herb kind of note to it, and you also get the ester profile, which is very large because they're fermented at a higher temperature, which drives those flavors out. So the esters will give you the fruitiness in the beer.
And many times people don't realize, they're tasting in like a German Hefe, they're tasting banana and clove. There's no banana and there's no clove in that beer. It's all flavors coming from the yeast itself.
That's the straight up yeast itself giving you those flavors in a traditional Hefeweizen.
And how hard is it for you? I know you're selecting different yeast for different beers.
Right.
How hard is it to choose the yeast you're going to choose for one of these beers? Is it if I'm brewing a wheat beer, it's always this kind of yeast, or is there a little bit of leeway there?
I think that comes down to the brewer's style or interpretation of the style, really, what kind you want to use. I mean, you wouldn't use a dry, like a neutral strain that you would use in an IPA to bring hops forward in a beer like a Hefeweizen. You would want to use the Hefeweizen strain. They're very, the different temperatures that you mash the product at will give you different flavor profiles from the yeast. A lot of traditional ways is called a ferulic acid rest, which is a very low starting fermentation process, which drives that out, which gives you the big banana kind of nose and flavors into the beer. So you can do things like that to manipulate the yeast, but the temperature is always critical.
So Benny, you're talking ferulic acid and phenolics and profiles, and Lindo could go on for hours and hours about Belgium. I'm feeling more and more like a piker over here.
You look like one with your Cousin Eddie hat on.
I do have my Cousin Eddie hat on. But no, seriously, I know that it's not just an art. There's a science to it as well, and obviously, it plays a huge role. And Bill, you were talking about the fact that it's so difficult to do because of the 3 different strains and so forth. But I'm like paddling as fast as I can to catch up here.
So,
go ahead.
Another thing with yeast, I mean, what we've been talking about so far the last few minutes is about yeast and selecting yeast that you're able to get and prepare for each beer. But another thing that's very common in Belgium and now here in the States is when you're using wild yeast. And so what happens is you have the beer that they lay it out in one particular brewery, Cantillon, which is very popular for their sours, is they'll spill it out into something called a cool ship, which is a big tray, and then they don't mess with anything in that brewery. If a cat passes away, they get a new cat. Everything stays the same because they cannot mess with the wild yeast that they have in their environment. So the yeast will just go ahead and fall onto the beer, and then it does its. So,
Lindo, you're talking about this is this huge shallow tray. I mean, it's gigantic, and there's beer just laying in it a couple of inches deep.
Maybe 20 feet, 25, 20 feet square, something like this. And it's probably maybe 2 feet deep.
And it just lays there open.
Open for, I don't know if it's, help me out, maybe a day.
Right.
A day to 3 days maybe. And it just does, it does it. So the temperature has a lot to do with it. And also the like I said, the environment. So at Cantillon, they're brewing over 100 years there. They don't change anything because they're very you can't control the yeast. So you got to make sure that you don't do something to harm them.
Wow.
Right. A lot of the breweries too are also done near fruit orchards in areas like that. So where they have like louvers on roofs where they let that open up and the breeze will blow the yeast strain or the wild yeast that'll be on the fruit itself. So that's really that a lot.
I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. At first, it was left up to chance, and now it's trying to make that chance happen all the time.
Yeah,
right?
now we're going back to it. We've done controlled yeast and propagated yeast, where we control it very, very carefully each batch. To now they're going back to wild yeast, where they open the windows and let the yeast blow in, essentially.
Wow.
Or controlled chance at this point.
And mixed fermentation, where they'll mix wild yeast and known yeast. We have all these Brettanomyces, Brett beers that we see. Today's beer, it's beer segment number 2, comes from Essen, Belgium. It's from a really, really historic brewery. It goes back to 1835, and it is from De Dole. And we're doing a
De
really...
Dole. Everybody, De Dole.
De Dole.
Okay.
And we're doing a really... they do a couple different beers. I know the first beer I found of theirs was called Boskuhn. This one is called Stillenacht. And Stillenacht translates roughly to silent night. And it's a Belgian strong...
Silent night.
So we should have sung coming in.
Sorry. All right. The WILK choir now, ladies and gentlemen.
It's like starting a wave, it just takes off and you don't have any control over it.
Still knocked.
Yeah, it's still knocked, and it's Silent Night. And this beer it's golden in color. I mean, you can look at it and see what it looks like. Has a really, really pretty white head, and it's hoppy. This has nugget hops in it, and you can taste them and you can kind of feel them. They use Belgian white candy sugar. That's a common brewing ingredient.
That sounds delicious.
In Belgium. It's sweetness. It brings sugar to the mix, and when you bring sugar to the mix, you know what you get. Alcohol.
Oh.
Well, they've got 3 different yeasts.
That's where your science comes in right there.
Right, yeah. Well, they've got yeasts that can stand up to that level of alcohol. There are strains of yeast that when you get to 5, 6, 7%, the alcohol content will kill the yeast.
That was the scientific term.
Yeah. Bye-bye yeast. So that's many times why they do this primary, secondary, and bottle conditioning is because they can stand up to that. This beer is 12% ABV.
So you could also pour this in your gas tank then, is that right? Or
you probably could run a car off this one. This brewery reopened. They've closed a few times, and they reopened in 2000, and they have saved every vintage of this beer since then. So they've saved 16 years of this. And back in 2014, they sat a professional tasting panel down, and they tasted every single vintage of this beer.
Wow.
And what they found was...
that panel selected or volunteer?
I'm betting it was both.
Oh.
they actually, the owner had one vintage that they couldn't find, and the owner dug back in his cellar and found that vintage, and so they charted the whole thing out. I mean, it's online. You can go see it if you want.
That's unbelievable.
And you can see the tasting profile and the scores for each vintage of the beer. And what they found with this beer is that about 4 years or 5 years old was optimal. So if it's brand new, it's still very good. If it's really old, it's still very good. But if it's 4 years or 5 years old, it's optimal.
It's at
the
peak.
best.
Wow.
All right, so should we get some comments from our
What do
beer
you think?
connoisseurs here?
Let's get
Becky.
Becky Kosadar-Krantz, the most highly decorated brewer in all of Mayfield, ladies and gentlemen.
All of Mayfield. Oh, God. Well, I mean, I think it's a very typical Belgian. I mean, it's a very good representation of the Belgian style. Reminiscing over here with Nan about our time in Belgium, and the high alcohol,
Yeah, so
it's perfect.
Well, there's a common flavor. When you say Belgian beers to people that are familiar with Belgian beers, they know that flavor profile. And it has that. It has that sort of yeasty flavor. It has a little grapey flavor. It has a tiny bit of estery flavor.
And they're more effervescent, too.
Yeah, fizzy. That's what I was going to... The mouthfeel on these is really, really fizzy.
Friday Beer Buzz alumni guest, the Joe Thomas. Joe, how do you like it?
It's strong. Bill Cosby called. He'd like a case of this for the holidays to serve as female guests.
Are we going to have to start editing? Remember when we had to edit our beer?
There's a note right there to go by. Here's my lovely wife, Karen. Dear, what do you think?
I think it was very good. I have finished mine.
There you go. The measure of whether or not it's very good. Where's Amanda? Amanda Sheptak, our electrical engineer, is here. Amanda, what do you think? You like it?
It was very good.
It is.
It was
good. All right.
And Joe, would Nico Rosberg drink a beer like this?
Oh, I think he would, now that he doesn't have to drive.
What the heck?
Formula One race car stuff, you guys.
In Formula One
Once
news.
again, left in the dust over here.
And
Thank
the
you.
hops and the sugars.
I'm a piker.
In Formula One news, Nico Rosberg has retired after winning the championship. What the heck is he thinking?
You can get yourself a bottle of this over at Sabatini's Bottle Shop and Bar.
Yeah, you can, absolutely.
Didol, is that right?
Yeah, it's Didol. We actually, speaking of vintages, we also did just receive 2008, so you can see what the difference between a 2008 and a 2015.
Wow. That's, of course,
Well,
Sabatini's on Wyoming Avenue in Exeter.
If people are looking for ideas for gifts, a lot of times that's why they listen, right?
Yep.
So if you forget the names of any of these beers, just remember to go to Sabatini's. Lindo remembers the beers. He'll tell you which ones they were.
Didol, Still Knocked is what we're enjoying here in segment 2. Fast break coming up, and then we're back with segment 3 of the special holiday pageant of the airwaves 2016 Friday Beer Buzz!